we'll give folks a few minutes to follow or to join in.
It's nice to finally see you, Kate, despite having worked in the same office for, what, 2 years?
I know. Hello. We're actually, it looks like you're home, but we're in Mount Sunapee right now for anyone that's whispered. Let me paste the links that we'll be looking at.
Yeah, Christmas season was home for waiting for gifts that require signing.
Yes, I relate to that, because all my shopping is done online.
You just got Patrick automate your signing.
That's good. Right. I just pasted the link to the Etherpad that we'll be taking notes in, so definitely keep that open. And then we're also in this IRC channel, so definitely feel free to join. And I'll officially get started in just another minute or two. Oh, it's a Randy.
Look at his mustache.
Hi, Randy.
I saw that mustache firsthand. It was disturbing.
Oh, man.
Can you throw the link up on screen again? For the...
Oh, this right here?
Yes.
Sure.
Great. I am typing it in.
Cool. All right. We could probably get started in just a moment or so. We'll get Mohan's just running out of the room for a second. So,
The Etherpad dash Mozilla link?
yes, Etherpad dash Mozilla.
And it turns out there is an Etherpad built into Jitsi, which maybe we'll use in the future, but for now we are ignoring that one.
Yeah, we don't know fully, how that works yet. So, hey, Paul. And hi to everyone else who I haven't seen on screen. I know a bunch of people joined all at once. Hello, Ralph.
Hello.
If the people are fellow Jitsers on the list, if you click on up in the left of the screen, top left of the screen, there's a little badge there. You can set your name there. That would be awesome.
All right, and I think we can probably get started. So with that being said, just a few things to note. So this is a little bit of an experiment using this tool. So in the case that this goes down for whatever reason, we are also in Fedora meeting. So I put that into the chat. So definitely, like I said, if we have to communicate with everyone to switch over to Hangouts, we'll be making that announcement through there. And then also feel free to interact over through that IRC channel. But yeah, we'll also be driving all of our conversations through the Retrospective Etherpad. And I also put that link into the chat. Can everybody that's just joined in the last minute or two see what I put in the chat before? I don't know I'm not sure how this works. Like, hopefully you get to see all. Yep, cool. All right, thank you, Randy. So yeah, and I know so Sly's with us, and she'll be interacting through the chat. So have you already started the meeting? Awesome. So she started the formal meeting in that chat. So yeah, I can definitely share my screen so we can look at the notes. But I recommend following along in the doc. Let me see if there even a share screen. Matt, do you know if you can share your screen on this? Maybe I spoke too soon. Yeah, I don't know if you can.
No idea.
Okay, yeah.
You can use the button in the middle of the bar on the top to share screen.
Oh, right. Okay, cool. Awesome. Thanks, Ralph. Oh, it's an extension, though. All right, we'll take this risk. See how it goes.
I'm guessing it probably won't work with Wayland or something like that.
All right. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
All right. All right, cool. Awesome. We'll get started then. So yeah, so currently, like I said, I'm had. Oh, I'm getting some terrible feedback. Is everyone muted? All right, I'll try that again. So I'm in the Etherpad right now. We're going to talk about two major things today. So we're going to talk about what went well during the F27 release and what could have gone better during the F27 release. I want to say a few things about retrospectives before we dive into that. So retrospectives are not at all about placing blame or throwing anyone under the bus or anything like that. We're simply here to, examine these two questions: what went well, what could have went better, and to determine, from that information, how we can improve going forward. So we're going to spend the first part of the meeting talking about what went well. We'll spend the remainder of that talking about what could have gone better. And from those things, we'll derive some action items, and then we'll have everybody vote on what they think is most pressing, so what really needs attention. And the top one or two action items, or the top one or two most voted items, we'll try to get some of that improved in the F28 release cycle. So yeah, so that's essentially what we're here to do today, and I believe this is the first just before. So yeah, does anyone have any questions before we get started? All right, so yeah, so feel free to type right into the doc. I'm going to be taking notes too, but with that being said, I'll open up the first question. So we'll spend about, we'll say 15 minutes on this one at most. So what went well during the F27 release? I know there's stuff that went well. Let's see. We released F27. Yes, that's very true. Yep. There's got to be more though.
So I think as far as the standard workstation release, which is obviously that's a big thing for our audience, because I think something like 85% of them pick that release up. For what I guess I would call the legacy style releases, things seem to go fairly smoothly there. So there weren't any last minute hiccups, no last minute shoving around of components. That seemed to go really well to me. I don't recall hearing any issues about things coming up late for release engineering there that they had to jump through hoops to make that happen.
Awesome. Do you want me to write that in, Paul, or would you mind? Do you want to write that into the doc?
I'll be happy to do that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. And those releases came out well. There weren't any embarrassing, gigantic bugs that we mixed that have come back to show up in the press. So good job.
Some of the things that have been written in. So we have workstation and standard cloud images seem to go really well. That's still being written, but that's really good. The way how no more alphas change has been implemented. So yeah, we shipped without an alpha, and we've made a lot of great progress into making composes gating and spinning out that result through Greenwave. Another one was Atomic Host was a lot more stable early on. So that's really great. What else went really well?
I was the one that added the one about Atomic Host, so if others differ on that opinion, let me know. From my end, it seemed like I was asking for less, at least as far as freeze exceptions go. Obviously, there was a lot of changes on the infra side, but that was compounded with the Bodhi plus Masher, or sorry, Bodhi plus Punji side. So.
Also, Dusty, do you want to add about F27 Atomic 2-week release? We were able to do a release, atomic release based upon F27 the very next day after GA of F27.
Mm.
Yeah, we actually did it on the same day as.
Yeah.
But we also did that last time, so I don't know if that was an improvement, but it was good to have that.
Retrospective doesn't require that it's new and improving.
I think the process of the Atomic Host was definitely much better leading into GA than the mad rush that we've had previously. It was an improvement.
Thanks, Dennis.
Someone else just wrote getting changes into Bodhi to use Punji. And yeah, that was a huge milestone. So that
was me.
That's great. So what else? You guys did great. Gotta give yourself more credit.
I'm not sure how to sum it up in the doc, but it's been cool to see less of a bus factor in Dennis. Like Mohan and everyone else is picking up a whole bunch of responsibility on the release, and it's really cool to see. And it's non-trivial too, because there's all that tribal knowledge.
I'm gonna write that in actually. So
we've transferred a lot of Dennis's stress to Mohan, right?
Oh yeah.
We need to figure out how to make it no one's stress and have it be like a machine learning bot or something that does everything for us.
We haven't gotten there yet. Focusing on the good right now.
Isn't that what Patrick is? There's no way he's human.
I saw him once.
His name in here is Pewterbot, so that supports it.
One thing I'll write in here, this is a little bit more of a project management thing, but we now have Epics and Taiga, which makes a huge difference in terms of Taiga usability, which is really great. All right, anything else from anyone? We still have 10 minutes that we could spend talking about what went well. All right. Well, this is a lot of great stuff. So, yeah, I mean, great job for everyone for getting after my signal at the door. But of course, the bulk of and what's already been written, the bulk of what we're probably going to discuss right now is what could have gone better. And like I said, let's keep the conversation, no blaming, finger pointing, or anything like that. Let's focus on the facts, and we'll drive discussions. And then toward the end, we can determine if there are any action items, and then we'll vote on which items we think should receive our attention for F28. So we'll start here. So. The first bullet point says modularity. So I think, Stephen, you wrote this. I'm not sure. And then I see a sub-bullet would have benefited from more lead time. So let's open up the conversation with that. What about modularity could have gone better?
Well, I'd actually like to challenge the would have benefited from more lead time in that I think we had to go through the growing pains we did. I think more lead time would have just led to having spent more effort on going down the wrong path. Mm-hmm. I think we needed. I think we actually needed this deadline to make us aware that all of these pieces that weren't quite coming together weren't going to come together. It required us to rethink where exactly we were going with it, and realize that we had made a couple of false assumptions that were unfortunately guiding principles. So I think what could have gone better. I'm not entirely sure we really could have done better without having stumbled first, but I think we learned a lot. And I think we've come up with a new counter proposal now going forward that we'll be able to bring in at a slower pace too than we tried to do with this. So I think what could have gone better is in Fedora 28 we will attempt to do things more piecemeal than try to do an all at once attack on this.
Yeah, I think I would go so far as to say that this is actually, although obviously not exactly a success for modularity, I think it is overall a success in Fedora because Fedora should allow people to do experiments that don't always succeed. And if we're actually trying to push the envelope, if we're succeeding every time, we are not trying hard enough. So this is a case of trying something, and it's one of those cases where that's not necessarily failure.
Right, exactly.
Exalt.
We found another way not to make a likelihood.
I think for the most part, we learned a lot from it, and it was very useful to go through. I think that we communication has always been a difficult thing to do. I think we've had much better communication, so that's definitely a plus. There's just so much that needed to be done, and so many pieces needed to come together. And I don't think there was any one person that had the entire picture of how all those pieces needed to come together. Even I didn't have all of the entire picture of how it all needed to come together. And so as we were getting things and making progress, we then hit roadblocks where we found there was extra work that had to happen. And overall, I think it was a good learning experience.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it too was that for most of the process, I had assumed that a certain other person had that perspective, and then discovered post beta that was not true. So there was an awful lot of scrambling to try and get people talking in the right circles. So yeah, communication. Not necessarily just communication, but figuring out when communication has broken, because it's really hard to notice when something isn't there as opposed to when it's wrong. I think it's something we need to work on.
We have a failure to understand scope and implications of scope. That's something that I see a lot. We make a very rosy picture of what's going to happen, and then consistently fail to deliver on it, and then come around and say that we learned from it by failing. But from my perspective, failing in such a public and terrible way, especially with release of the modularity server or the lack of release, I don't know that does anything other than make us look like we didn't think it through. So I would not put that under we learned something, unless we say that we learned that we need to address our scoping much better, more so than breaking it up, but working towards a more realistic expectation around our releases and how much we can actually fit into a release. Because even though we want to move fast and break things, as the famous parlance is, in an operating system environment, I don't know that we really want to be doing that, because that's not what users expect, even though we are on the almost bleeding edge.
That's a fair opinion. I'm not sure I entirely agree. I think I agree more with Matthew that we have to, in order to continue to be relevant, can't just be the also rans. We can't be the ones who just, who make incremental improvements around over what Ubuntu does every 6 months. I think we need to be the ones that go back to directing where open source leads, and sometimes that means perfect.
But to a point, though, it's the inversion of how we placed it. Like, the modularity was a huge thing to do, and we should have had a deadline, but that should have been a, here's our prototype. Had the deliverable be the bog standard F27, but then push the deadline so that from a public standpoint, what we delivered was F27, but look at this amazing new thing, so that the dependable thing was still there first with the modularity behind, and we still would have had the failure at a deadline, the learning from it, but it wouldn't have impacted our top line deliverable, if that makes sense. It's the inversion of where we put the emphasis of the hard lining for deliverability and putting that same deadline, but not making it the linchpin of what our public face is, what we deliver, and appear to have failed or succeeded at.
Simple words. I don't know how to do that.
I don't know how to either.
Don't ever try to do anything big in Fedora. Try to do it somewhere else and then merge it to Fedora.
So I think
perspective I can understand, but don't agree with.
Yeah, in retrospect, I think that probably we had a secret plan of we've got Fedora assertional being made, and we could have pulled the plug on that, but we didn't, because it was harder to pull the plug than to just keep making it. And QA was secretly actually also testing it. We maybe should have decided to go with that contingency more officially earlier, rather than basically deciding that last week, because we kind of knew we had that in the back pocket all along. It might have looked less failure-y from the outside if we had done that, but I think it's working out okay.
So I'll put a bullet point here and just sort of say, community perspective, maybe consider community perspective, just to capture sort of high level what we just talked about. I'll add something here from my side, which is that I think maybe there could be more project management practices sort of that were executed. So like, I know that we definitely do things a little bit more unique in the Fedora world. Will benefit from some more project management sort of oversight. I know modularity is a big one, so we're definitely spending a little bit of extra time on it. But what else do people have to add here?
Perhaps I would like to have like one comment that even I was voting as a Fedora member, as Fedora Council member, to like overrule the decision of FESCO and ServerSig not to deliver the modularity in a scope of Fedora 27. I think that like for the future, we should avoid doing such decision on the council level, because I believe that people in the community doing the technical work typically have better understanding from the technical point of view what is feasible and what not. And like overruling their decision from the council level, when I look at it from the retrospective, I think it was a good idea to do.
And just for a bit sorry, I'm getting an echo here. Okay, just for a bit of context too, part of that was because at the our illustrious primary sponsor came to the council and basically begged that for their own reasons, they would very much like to see this complete, which was tantamount to an order. So probably we could have spent more time. Although again, I still think that had we just waited until F28, we would have gotten it wrong 6 months later, as opposed to getting it wrong earlier and having time to think about approach. So I'm not sure it was necessarily the wrong outcome, because we were definitely headed down a wrong path, and this failure, and it is a failure, did force us to reevaluate the direction we were taking.
Yeah, I think that I fully understand why this was done in this way, but what I'm saying that when I like trying to think of it from the retrospective point of view, that we should try to avoid such a thing doing in the future. I don't think that, or actually I agree with you, Stephen, and I understand why this was done. I just want to say that for the future, we might be like more careful when doing something like this again.
Awesome. Thanks for the feedback, Jan.
I think the one, like, kind of follow on from there, the one thing that we could have done was wait until we've actually delivered modular server once before making it the release blocking server variant. Like have a rule where we, deliver something fully through the pipeline one time before we then make it the default. Changing though, if it's a new type of deliverable entirely, it's kind of different than changing a deliverable as well.
I completely agree with that in theory. Again, the problem we had here, and that's basically what I was aiming for at beta. We had pressures from outside that were strong.
No. Because I know, like, at the start, that was the argument I was trying to say that we should do. Server in place as it is, and
the truth was we as the server sig didn't have the resources available to do both concurrently. I mean, in all practicality, there are not very many people who actually do Fedora Server Edition specific work. Mostly it's me.
Okay.
I couldn't do both.
Yeah.
The fact was we basically shipped what we are shipping in Fedora 27 for Server Edition is essentially exactly the same as we shipped in 26, but with some updated packages.
Sure. It's
no new development there.
Right. I'm kind of hearing from that we probably need to work with the council to try and increase involvement in the server sig, given that it's an addition and not a, not like XFCE or one of the minor spins, but it's a actual addition. We probably need to figure out how to get more resources there.
Yeah,
but that's outside of the scope of this.
Yeah, let's take that out. But I agree.
So, so I definitely want to move on to some of the other parts. Like I said, I know. So maybe we'll do one or two other additional feedbacks. Does anyone else have anything they want to add here? Nope. All right. Well, in that case, we'll move on to the next one for now. The next sort of piece of feedback is communication around Bodhi and Punji master plans. So did whoever wrote this, or does someone want to start on this discussion?
That was me, and we don't need to spend very much time on it. The people involved in it, I think we've already talked about it a bit, but we had two different teams implementing changes to add Punji integration into Bodhi, so Bodhi would use Punji to do its updates process, and we just didn't communicate very well as that was going along, and ended up wasting some dev cycles. And I think that's fine. We all kind of had talked about it, so I guess that's all.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense. I was going to add something, but it sounds like honestly this covers it. But does anyone else have anything to sort of contribute to this, or any ideas or thoughts? All right, we'll go on to the next one. Next one says, no more alphas, put more pressure on beta because the rawhide testing wasn't ready.
Sorry, that one was mine as well. I think, yeah, we successfully managed to not put out an alpha with all the release process that entails, but at the same time, it shifted all of the potential blockers that would have been on alpha out to beta. Whereas in the past, we had an expectation that what was going to happen is that we'd have rawhide gating on effectively the old alpha criteria, so that we would always be alpha quality. I'm not sure that part of the no more alphas plan actually occurred.
Wasn't quite. We kind of got lucky with that, and also I guess partly because the cycle was so short, there wasn't a lot of time for stuff to change and break. So, yay.
I know that for absolute falsehood because it was a mess in modularity because of all the stuff that changed.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the next comment in the feedback in there was mine, that been more time in the schedule because things were really tight, and so we ended up, a lot of the slippage that we had at beta was just clean up like post mass rebuild, and everybody, like F26 got out the door, we did the mass rebuild a week later, a few days later, and then everyone just shoved in a ton of change because they're like, oh crap, I need to get all my F27 work done. And as a result, instead of the work that normally happens over a period of a couple of months, it all went in over a couple of weeks, and it took us a long time. It was the large reason for most of the beta slippage, was just cleaning everything up post that massive influx of change in a really short window.
This is part of why I've been suggesting for the last 2 years that we should effectively have a freeze from beta freeze until final, where the idea is that if you don't get your stuff in before beta, it goes in for the next Fedora release, and we stop allowing it in between beta and final.
Yeah, part of the problem with that is what happens is it just gets all piled up as 0 days. So you end up with a release with less change, but then a lot more like immediately post-release change.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think some of that might be fixable once we have the CI stuff in place, which wouldn't allow the really breaking changes. we put protections in place to keep the really breaking changes from landing in 0 days.
Yeah. I mean, the CI stuff, the CI work that I was expecting to land still hasn't landed. I was kind of, as part of the No More Alpha, I was relying on some external teams to deliver CI work that they were working on, which is still not being landed. But yeah, having the CI and having the testing, I think, is going to be critical to making sure that we don't slip things in the future.
Yeah,
and
so
makes it easier.
one thing on the short schedule, I suggested that if we ever have a short schedule this short again, we should just skip the release. And it seems like everybody hates that. People prefer the short schedule to skipping a release. I think that kind of, I don't think we really want to do either of those things. I think we should make sure that we don't schedule the releases, the spring release to go in, so that goes into July in the future. I think that was
the slippage in F26 really hurt things, because that was 6 weeks long.
Yeah, and it was already scheduled to be like late June rather than beginning of May, so it was like really like a 2-month slip altogether from ideal, even though it wasn't really like an actual slip.
The people who prefer the really short release cycle versus skipping a release, are they users or do they work on Fedora? Because that's
an excellent question. No, it was actually people working on Fedora. A lot of that's coming from the Fedora workstation side of things, but actual people who are doing stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. That would make a big difference.
There are a number of teams out there, of which GNOME and GCC and glibc are the big flag holders that have cycles for their upstreams that are very tightly bound to Fedora's upstream, to Fedora's downstream. So they really don't like it.
I'm going to add in an action item here. And I'm going to say that the action item from just this feedback would be to investigate with a similar situation again, where we have a very short release cycle. There's a lot to consider here, and that F27 did slip, so we already have a little bit of time that we've eaten up in F28. So it sounds like this could be something that might be worth doing if people vote on it.
The easiest way is just to reduce scope of change.
Well, there's a lot of ways to sort of cope with it. So whether or not it's changing what we commit to, whether or not it's changing the the schedule, I'll definitely put in an action item for investigation on that. I definitely want to move along though, because we do have other feedback to talk about. So before I do, does anybody have any remaining thoughts on this one?
Yeah, the only other question is, considering all the talk about alphas, do we actually think it would be better to go back and implement an alpha again? Or do we think it's better the way it is, even though we didn't get everything that we wanted, meaning gating and stuff like that?
I think that we're better off leaving it as is. We're working on getting the compose gating in place, and hopefully the package gating comes along as well. But I think we at the very least we proved that we can make things work without alpha, and that frees up a little extra time in the cycle to enable more change to come in.
I did add that point to the action item, still for investigation, just because that definitely is something to certainly consider. So we'll move on to the next one for now. So the next one is we need a process around how to handle things like the recent glut of GNOME shell bugs killing user sessions because of Wayland. And then someone wrote, this isn't really a Relinger issue. So yeah, so the scope of this meeting, just to clarify, are definitely more release engineering focused things. So if this is something that doesn't involve release engineering specifically, then
okay. So the scope wasn't clear from the invite. It just said Fedora 27 retrospective. So The basic problem was we the cycle of potential blocker bugs that were essentially a crashing GNOME shell because we've switched to Wayland for everybody. Means have all become data loss bugs because a crash kills the system. It was a potential to cause continuous slippage, and we ended up kind of fudging the answer. But I mean, it is in terms of Fedora Fedora 27 itself. This was a problem with getting to a release.
So it's worth noting we actually do have a process that I'm not particularly sure that this bug fits into. We have this prioritize bugs process that Jan runs, and I know, Steve, you participate in this, so it's not like this is news to you. But we do have a way of saying this is a bug that is not necessarily a blocker, but Fedora as a project considers it's important and gets on it.
I'm not sure that's effective either. We've now got a list of things that we say here's a lot of really important stuff that does not seem to get any more particular attention than anything else.
Oh, that's not true. We definitely do get attention on these things, and you can, if you look in the link there, a lot of them have actually been fixed, right? And a lot of that is because of attention that we've drawn to through this.
Okay, I was trying that then.
Some of the things are still there, but and then we try to keep the list short. It's a list of 100 things, then none of it's going to get done. But if we keep it like 4 or 5 or 6, like I can personally go around to people and call in favors and nag, and when it's Red Hatters, try to get Red Hat resources aligned when it's a Red Hat concerned issue. And so this Wayland thing is pretty big. It's bigger than most of those bugs, but it is the GNOME team at Red Hat and to GNOME in general about this is something we need to deal with. So there it is. I don't know if it'll stay on the prioritized bugs list. This gets kind of in the weeds, though.
One thing that this kind of reminds me of is, do we sort of have an escalation process within the community? So, like for example, a lot of the times, at least from my perspective, I won't find out that things are on fire until a little bit after they've been on fire, And I'm just wondering, like, do people, when something does go wrong, do people know where to raise that to if it's not getting the attention it needs?
Well, I think that's a bit of a vague question because there are a lot of moving parts in Fedora.
If it is something related to package, we'll talk to the package maintainers and get their attention and see if they can fix it.
What about for release engineering, though? So if something involves release engineering and it's not getting the attention it needs, do people feel that they can such that we know about it? Is that clear to people?
I think in a lot of cases, people don't realize that the failure is happening at release engineering. They assume it's happening somewhere else. I think that's in part because you guys do such a good job that everyone assumes it just works. But I think a lot of times people mistake things for being a packaging problem or for being a maintainer problem, as opposed to actually being specifically an issue with release engineering. People assume things are a bug in Bodhi or in particular applications, not necessarily in a pipeline.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, a lot of times people don't know where to report things to, and like they might just report things in Bugzilla. It tends to be, I don't know, it tends to get neglected sometimes, especially if it's like a particular maintainer who's not looking at it. And all of a sudden a big problem sits there for weeks on end. I wonder if it's worth something like some sort of user voice application or something where people can upvote things that they're interested in or things that are really big problems for them, and also people to infinitely vote, so they only get a certain number of votes and those have to get distributed out across issues.
Yeah, I'm wondering if I just started this, wondering if it's worth creating an action item to investigate how we can somehow ensure that RELNG is is kept in the loop regarding important items, because if we're not in the know, then we can't respond, and that could potentially cause a lot of problems. And I don't know, like from my perspective, I don't know if we have this as much as we could benefit from having something like this, whatever it may be. Do folks feel like this would be worth some investigation?
I'm not sure whether we can do this. I mean, like there are a bunch of places where people can file tickets, and like Reliance or Infra or whoever it may be, like they will try to watch the mailing list or the repos on Tagger or Bugzilla tickets, which are related to them. So I'm not sure if we can do something.
Basically, we need more people with a global view, and then more people with like a specific view talking to the people with global views. So we just need more Matt DMs, basically.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I'm the escalation path for a lot of things, and that's fine. I can at least triage things and pass it on to the right person. I think for a lot of the things you're talking about, it is probably FESCO as a committee that is the escalation path. And that will at least get some response and attention to it.
Okay. I'll keep this as an action item, but like I said, we'll be voting on things. So maybe if this isn't necessary, don't vote, and we'll take what we feel is. Does anyone else have any last feedback for it?
I do think that it would be having CI in place would help as well. Just solid, but there's no simple solution to the problem. It's a difficult, complex problem.
Yeah.
As it relates to Relange, having people fix, like sometimes we end up having to chase down people last minute because we're running out of time, or QA chases down people in order to get testing to be able to sign off on it in time. And I don't know, somehow we do need to have a better way to make sure that the people that we're being blocked on getting composers done, whether it's a GNOME shell crashing bug or some other bug, that we have a good communication loop with those people, and we know when, without having to sit there twiddling our thumbs and then rushing around like crazy people trying to get it fixed and figure out what's going on at the last minute.
All right, this is really good input. I mean, even if having these conversations now definitely keeps us in our minds if we do eventually find that we need to address this or not. For the sake of time, let's definitely move on to the other feedback we have. I know there's a bunch of stuff that's still being added. The next one is the new packager tooling is not feature complete with the old tooling, and where it is feature complete, it is more cumbersome to use. And there's a lot of text here, so rather than reading it all, I'll open up the conversation here and allow for people to sort of add in. All right, so someone wrote, "Is this package DB?" Another person wrote, "We lost automatic Anitya and Kashi integration." Koshi integration.
It's about right, but it's Koshi.
Both of those are now easy to forget to set up and cumbersome if you do remember.
It was, and all that was in package DB, and now it's spread across multiple, and it's not. There's no central visibility into a package status and lifecycle that we used to have. Like finding where a package is in PDC is difficult. Finding the package in Pagure is simple, but
Mhm.
Pagure doesn't have the option to make like Koshai or Anita or other other tooling automatic. I know like one thing that has irritated me with this, like this morning I had about 500 broken DEPS emails because for some reason through the process, RelEng at Fedora Project, the RelEng user became one of the owners of all the packages. And as a result, we get put into the email alias. So anytime anyone emails about packages, RelEng gets notification.
So forgive me because I'm not as technical, but does it sound like there's a mismatch in what was implemented and user expectations?
There was a lot of regressions in what was implemented, and we need to come up with a plan to address those regressions.
There are still a lot of missing pieces. Some of the things that are with package DB are still like now we have to do manual steps, and some of them rely on message bus. So if the message, if the listener didn't get that, we will not know anything about it until someone complains about it.
I think all of this ties back to the previous conversation we had a couple of points ago about we have very ambitious plans, and we try to deliver a very ambitious plan, but we don't understand all the pieces. And so we put this into play without understanding what things that were integral parts of our releasing cycle. And we didn't have that plan. So I think this highlights something we've talked about before, which is we need a more rigorous form of project management in general over the whole release cycle and what comes in, not just around what products go in, but around the tooling side. And we have gotten some of that, slide sitting right here, but we need to really get that in focus, because the way to get things out quickly and stay ahead of the curve on delivering the most leading edge stuff is to have that rigorous process that protects us from massive regressions, loss of functionality, right? I think this ties in well. A lot of these things all kind of roll up into this, that we do not have a process that protects us from shooting our own foot off. And we do it almost every cycle. I've been here for 3 cycles, and every cycle it's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think what everybody's saying here is we probably rushed the deployment of this out before it was ready, but I think that probably has to do with multiple things. What you said, Rob, regarding project management is a big part. The more we get integrated with planning and adhering to schedules and scopes and all that stuff, the better off we'll be. It also hurts because a lot of people that work on this stuff tend to have dueling roles, as far as like there's like a team that they work on that's not Fedora, and they do a lot of Fedora related stuff too, and sometimes things don't necessarily get considered appropriately, or they might not attend Fedora planning like they should, or there's a lot of reasons why it is not ideal right now, and I think improving that is one of the best things that we can do going forward.
I want to point out on the Pagure on dискit front, walk back and try to remember why we did it, and there were 2 reasons, or 2 different fronts why. One of them was the CI stuff for trying to do the atomic host CI. So we wanted to have pull requests on packages, so we could submit a pull request, and then everything would be run, and in terms of building and testing, and results would come back to Pagure pull requests. And to my knowledge, we still can't quite do that. There's been a lot of work done to get us close to that, but we still can't quite. For pull requests in general, one thing that was missed there was, what are we going to do about, what's it called? The look-aside cache, right? You can submit changes for new spec files, but our build systems can't do anything with it because they don't have the tarball that should go with that. So that's a thing. Another angle for why we did Pagure on dискit, branching thing for modularity. And we had originally thought about putting the arbitrary branching stuff directly into package DB and then thought at the time that it would be easier to instead just do away with package.db and go ahead with this Pagger effort. The thing is, the arbitrary branching is also not being used heavily. A handful of modules declare and use arbitrary branches, but it's not a great many. So there were two reasons why we wanted to do it. We put it in place. We still can't quite do, or we still don't do either of those things, and we also broke a bunch of things, a bunch of regressions, as are pointed out in the Etherpad. So that's this is one of the strongest failures in my mind of the F27 cycle going into it. And yeah.
Is there a way to use arbitrary branches for things other than local stuff? Is there a way to use an arbitrary branch and have the output land somewhere other than modularity?
Not today.
Yeah. So.
Not in the way it was designed.
Right.
So a couple notes that I added here. So for one, I added an action item to investigate how we can repair this moving forward to make sure that we do get the functionality we need. And the other sort of feedback I added in, this was something that Rob had said, which was lack of more rigorous project management in Fedora. And an action that I added there was, investigate potentially what project management processes should be and need to be established. So we do have only 10 minutes left, and we just have a few more items to discuss. So I do want to make sure we get to those. We'll move on to the next one, which is multi-arch support in the container registry. We'll open up discussion there.
I put that in. It's just particularly given that the Docker Hub upstream supports multi-arch, and all of the arches for Fedora are there. And because we put Fedora registry as the first registry in our search path for Docker, if you do it like Docker pull Fedora on, say, AH64 box, you will get a x86-64 base image pull down. But if you do Docker pull docker.io Fedora, you will actually get the AH64 image. And it's just something that would have been nice to make sure that as we're kind of pushing multi-arch a little more, and particularly given that the upstream Docker hub and registry supports the multi-arch that we did, would make the experience a little nicer. But it's not like a huge thing, and there's probably not a huge amount of people actually using it.
Okay, and a question was just added there, Dennis. Is it the registry or is it OSBS?
I guess it's the registry. OSBS does support multi-arch.
Both, but have the registry that we pull from by default. If we didn't have the layered images, but we had a base image, it still provides value for people to use and doesn't take users having to do a workaround by making sure that they pull it from docker.io instead of just pulling Fedora. So more so the registry than OSBS, because I know the OSBS stuff is still being figured out.
Are we lacking sort of cross communication about multi-arch in general? Like, do you feel that we need better coordination on that effort? Because I know I see the next comment is no communication about addition of S390 architecture.
It probably definitely needs more communication. It's
what is our pod that looks at the architectures and variants that we distribute? We have a centralized group that manages that or meets and talks about it. Functioning groups talk.
Pesco. But it's not, I don't think it's something that actually came up at all. I mean, we've had the multi-arch, we've had like Power AR64 and 32-bit ARM Docker base images for 3 or 4 Fedora releases now. But in order to use them, you had to like go and wget the tarball and then import it into your machine locally. There's not been support. Like historically, the registry in upstream never supported multi-arch. It's only recently gained support for it, but our registry has not yet gained that support.
Right. I think this is a relatively simple fix. Patrick and the IRC channel seems to think it's a simple fix. I think we just need to create an issue for this if there's not already one and prioritize it.
I'll add that as an action item here. And then I also I added another action item that basically says to investigate how we can better communicate and collaborate on multi-arch efforts, especially since it's something that we will likely see more of coming up. So that sort of ties in with the next sort of bullet point here, which was that there was no communication about the addition of S390 architecture.
Yeah, so regarding your comment about how do we better communicate on multi-arch efforts, I know there's people in the community that kind of wear the multi-arch hat and kind of go around and do mercenary type work and cherry pick stuff and fix things. If there was a group like a SIG or Taggart group or whatever, and they meet regularly and they kind of engage the rest of the community and say, hey, look, there's this issue we want to fix, and they can link us back to those issues. Or we could even submit our issues up to that group. It might be just having a central point where we can kind of queue off multi-arch stuff might be good, and also maybe a team of people we can contact about issues that we have. One example is we have Cindy. She comes to our atomic working group meetings. She helps us get our atomic images in order and everything. But I'm sure she has a group of people that she talks to under Josh Boyer and people from the community. So just getting that side of things more organized might help with the communication.
Sure. So I did put in the comment for the S390 issue. It was communicated as part of the F26 secondary arch redefinition that it would happen in 27, but it was, the communication, I guess, was not re-communicated that, this part of the change is happening now. The builds for S390 were happening for about 6 or 8 weeks. It was very close, shortly after we branched F26 that we were able to set up Rawhide to build S390 builds. It was probably like 6 or 8 weeks of builds happening before we were able to do S390 composers for Rawhide. And I think most people were caught by surprise when the composers started landing, as opposed to the building that happened a long time before that, which was a communications breakdown that could have been done better.
Okay. Any last remaining comments on this one before we move on to the last item?
I think that the larger than just multi-arch.
If there's any questions on that, I can try to answer them.
Oh, Rob had one piece of feedback.
Yeah, like larger than the multi-arch. One thing that we have is we have a very fractured system of change tracking in general. Like we know that these things happen in, we keep saying, well, this was an issue that was in this place in Pagure and an issue over there, but we have multiple Pagures with issues and no central lens with which to examine. To a point like the process for change span more one release, but we don't really have a tight change management process, and that's somewhat similar but different from a project management process. But change management allow the ITIL definition of it, where we know what we're changing and we have a definition and we can see through one lens all the different issues in each individual Pagure project. Because that's something that happens. It'll be very clear on the working group, but it's not clear to the upper tier. So a way to bubble all of those together, and I'm not sure if that's an enhancement to Pagure or something else, whatever it is, but some way to put all those Pagure issues into one lens figure out what we need, and get those into our project management
Did you lose Kate?
and change control list.
Oh, can you not hear us?
She's muted.
Oh no.
I can hear Kate.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, I was like, oh no, Rob just gave some good feedback. Dennis, I think was having connectivity issues on my screen. Would someone mind letting him know in the chat that we're still ongoing? I did add an action item here to investigate a process for change management.
I guess my audio is messed up.
Yeah, he figured it out.
What's funny is we can hear him, but I guess he can't hear us.
I know.
Otherwise, talk.
More than change management, though, a central lens through which to view all the things that are happening, be that Taiga, be that something else. But we need a central lens to put everything together so we have that larger picture to manage. Like, because we don't have it all together in one place. So we can't manage it if it's not all in the, like, on the table, so to speak. That seems to happen, or at least it comes up at the last second, and oh well, it's in this, and it's always like it's an issue on this Pagger board, but the Pagger boards aren't necessarily by temporal or prioritized, so it'll be 3 pages back, and if we didn't know to look, it wouldn't be there.
I did add in something for that. It's called portfolio, which essentially means multi-project management. We are at time, so we're at 2 p.m. right now. We did have one last piece of feedback to discuss. Unfortunately, we're not going to have the time to do that, so definitely take a look, add some feedback in the document directly. Sly and I will follow up with some post-retrospective instructions. So I think we'll have people go through this document and sort of indicate, where they mostly feel like we should really pay attention to improving for the F28 release. And then we'll look at what's most voted at, and then we'll try to implement some sort of improvement for that in the next release cycle. So thank you all for contributing, though, and sorry we're a minute over, but.
Kate, thank you so much for running this. It was really, really nice.
Yeah, I'm glad that I hope it was valuable for everyone. I know I'll leave with my favorite quote to end retrospectives on. Hindsight is always 20/20. Do not beat yourself up over this. These meetings are simply to figure out how we can get better. There's always ways we can improve, even if everything seems magical and wonderful and happy. So yeah, this is really a positive thing, and I hope everybody sort of takes that from here. So we'll be following up with, like I said, some post-retrospective instructions, and definitely feel free to keep an eye out for that.
Awesome. Thanks again. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Kate.
Yeah, thank you very much.